Alright, so in this video we're checking out the new Hummingbird RaceSpec V2 from NewBeeDrone, and I did a video on the V1. I will link that in the video description. That wasn't that long ago, maybe 4 months ago or so, and well, a lot's changed and a lot's not changed. So let's before we get into all the differences between this new version and the old one, let's show you what comes in the box. So of course you get the two spares of the ASI props here. So these are ASI tri-blade 31mm, and there's a set of 8 in here with a 1mm shaft, and so you get 12 props total with the forwards already on there. Get a prop removal tool and a spare canopy for the camera. Get some spare screws and rubber grommets. And you're going to get this USB-C board that attaches to the flight controller. We'll talk about this here in detail in a second. And you get a RaceSpec V2 quick start guide, and shows all the stuff that's on there, which we'll talk about. Alright, so now in terms of the differences between the old version and this new version, I'm going to put a little thing up here on the screen, a chart that they sent me, and it seems like almost everything's changed except for the props, the frame, and the motors. So the same motors, 0702 30,000 kV. We now have a whole brand new all-in-one flight controller board, and it doesn't have a name, but it has the AT32F435 MCU. So this is a totally updated MCU versus the old F411, and it is faster in terms of like processing speed and capabilities. Also, I think there's a slight bit of a cost reduction going to that MCU as well. However, you will need the latest version of Betaflight Configurator and or the AT32 drivers. So if you don't have the proper USB drivers for this flight controller, then you won't be able to connect to Betaflight, so make sure you got those latest drivers. Updated gyro now, ICM gyro instead of the BMI 270 gyro, probably because the BM270i is harder to find. New ESCs, so they're calling these dual N channel 18 amp ESCs versus the old version had 12 amp ESCs. So probably good for crashing, because sometimes you get these voltage spikes when you crash, and having ESCs can handle a little bit more current. Not a bad thing, although it's probably overkill in my opinion. New VTX now. So this is the one that came with the previous video. I think it was a standard Hummingbird. They now have the new SmartMax VTX on here, which can go from 25 to 400 milliwatts max power, but it has basically a power amplifier that can adjust the power output based on the temperature. So like for example, if you crash and the whoop is just sitting there at 400 milliwatts, it might burn out if the power doesn't go down. It'll detect the temperature going up because you're not flying, and it will reduce the power. I've shown a video of this, and I think it was a previous model where this was in action, and of course people were wondering why this wasn't in the last version. I was kind of wondering that as well. Not sure why, because the last version was only 25 milliwatts. So definitely a welcomed improvement. So you have that ability to go a little bit further, have a little bit more range. Of course, if you want to stick to 25 milliwatts for your whip races, you got that as well. Now this new board has a non-SPI or standard UART based Express LRS receiver, instead of the previous version had the SPI Express LRS receiver, which I think everybody just didn't like, mainly for inconvenience because it's tied to the Betaflight version. And now we have a new BI V2 800 TVL analog camera, which replaces the old BI 600 TVL camera. I'm not sure if it's that much different. It seems like it's slightly more resolution, maybe better light handling. I haven't done extensive testing on this particular camera to really tell you either way. It looks pretty similar to me, maybe a little bit better. This is very anecdotal, but yeah, we have a new camera now. So a lot of new things have been added and updated on this new version, although it pretty much looks the same, at least from the outside. Now, in terms of the weight, it has not changed. I think it's about the same. So they're saying about 16.5 grams, and on my scale, it's 16.46 grams. I don't have the old version intact anymore. I took it apart to build a lighter setup here. So this is my custom build, which I took 2 grams off. So it's 14.5 grams. So I can't really do any direct comparisons in terms of like V1 to V2 because I did tear it apart. And of course, the lighter version does fly. The 2 grams make it fly significantly faster and with more flight time, but can't really do that comparison fairly. Now, looking at the board itself, I'll show you here. It looks the same on the surface, but you can see there's no USB port there. So that micro USB port is gone. The motors are still directly soldered to the flight controller as before. Of course, this is the same ultralight cockroach frame. That's not changed. That's not updated at all. It's the same as before. New canopy here. So my V1 came with a canopy with the camera further back, but that had an issue where if in a crash, because this is flexible, the camera board would hit the flight controller and kill the flight controller. So they made an updated canopy. So I think later batches, not the first few batches of the V1, were sold with the camera further back, but then the later batches were sold with this updated canopy with the camera more forward, so that if you do have a hit here, it won't hit the flight controller board. So that is basically something that I didn't get to test in the first version because I had the old canopy, but this new canopy is fine. I thought it would get a lot of jello, but it doesn't really vibrate that much. It seems to be pretty good, and it held up pretty well in all the crashes, but you can see it is a lot more forward there, and you got a fair amount of camera angle there. So they're not recommending this for beginners. If you're a beginner, I would recommend getting the previous model that I reviewed, I think it's the Hummingbird V2 or V4, I forget. I'll link that down in the description. I'll say if you're a beginner, I would recommend getting this one instead. It's basically a more robust version of this, and I think it came with these motors as well. I think that was the significant update for that version. That is more suited for beginners. It's more durable. This is still not super fragile, but if you crash a lot, I think it's going to take a lot of abuse and may break. And also is a lot harder to handle because it is very light and very fast and agile. Plus, you have a lot of camera angle there. So for you beginners out there, would recommend the other model, and I'll link that video down in the video description. Now, of course, it's interesting is they added the UART SPI receiver, or the UART Express LRS receiver now, which I think makes the board heavier, and so to sort of compensate for that weight addition, to keep the weight at 16.5 grams, they removed the USB port, and so now you have to use this little expansion board here with these small pins. And it looks like that. And you got to be really careful. These pins are very easy to bend. I actually had to bend one of them back because it can get a little tricky to get these in here. It goes right there in these 4 holes. And yeah, this is going to be difficult to do on camera, but I'll try and stick this in here. And basically, we put it in like this, like so, and then you plug in the USB-C cable. They're recommending plugging the board in first. Make sure it is in properly before you plug in the USB-C cable, because that has power on. Even though the 5 volt is on top and the ground's on the bottom, you may short something on the flight controller if you are sort of fiddling around and you don't want anything with 5 volts hitting anything on the board randomly. So plug in the board first and then plug in your USB-C cable. That will give you a proper connection. Of course, this is just for when you're setting it up and doing firmware flashes and etc. And of course, you're going to take the board off of here when you go and fly, because having this on here is just dead weight and you don't want to leave that on there, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit, I don't know. I'm not sure how this is going to hold up. It would have been nice to have 2 of these in the packaging, because I think if you're kind of all thumbs like me sometimes, you might break these little pins here and then you're pretty much hosed. So you'll have to buy another one of these. So I'm not sure if this was the best solution, but this is what they came up with to keep the weight down as low as possible. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments below. Not sure how that USB board is going to hold up with these really fragile pins. Only time will tell. And of course, it depends on who is using it and how they're using it. So now, in terms of how it flies, some people will say that the AT32 is going to be noticeably more responsive than the F411. I have heard that anecdotally through the grapevine. Not really sure if I believe it or not. You guys can let me know what your experiences are in the comments, but pretty much felt the same to me. Maybe a little bit more responsive, just like in terms of when you're flying fast and making quick turns and stuff. But honestly, I think I don't have the skill level to really know to recognize that there's a performance difference. Obviously, in terms of raw numbers, the MCU is definitely faster in terms of just pure specs. But in terms of how that translates into how it feels to the pilot, yes, there's anecdotal evidence out there, people suggesting or proclaiming that the AT32 is more responsive, but I personally haven't felt that myself. But of course, this is targeted towards top-end racers, and for those folks that are that skilled, they may actually notice the difference and would want the higher performing processor. So not sure if that really helps anyone out there, but for your casual flyers out there, maybe getting into racing, it probably won't make much of a difference. Anyway, overall bottom line is I felt like the performance was pretty much the same as the V1. And of course, they did all these little modifications and improvements that I think that people were wanting once the V1 came out. They were like, oh, how about this, how about that? Like the UART-based Express LRS receiver, for example. And so they've incorporated all those suggestions into this updated model. But yeah, I think that'll cover it for this video. Got any questions, let me know in the comments below, and there'll be a link to this as well as the old videos as well down in the video description. That'll do it for this one. I'll talk to you guys in the next video.